Hello and welcome to Smash Course Large History due to copyright issues. I am Tom Blue, and today we will be talking about the biggest issue affecting our planet. No, not yellow starbursts. Global warming! The dumping of millions of tons of carbon dioxide into the atmosphere, causing huge amounts of destruction to our planet. Mr. Blue, but it doesn't feel like it's getting warmer outside. How could it possibly be affecting our planet? Oh, silly me from the past. You see, it's not quite that simple. And that is the basis for today's episode of Smash Course Large History, Vision of the Future. That actually took a lot of work.
And it also took a piece of paper, which came from a tree which removes CO2 from the atmosphere. Which brings us back to the topic of Earth's warming climate. You see, Earth's climate has been warming since the beginning of the Industrial Revolution. But what is global warming? And how does it affect us? Let's start at the very beginning. No, not the Big Bang. The beginning of Earth. When Earth was created, it was left with a molten iron core and a viscous sort of mantle on which all the crust floated on, making us lava surfers. Since this mantle was always moving through convection, the pieces of crust were always moving, shifting, compressing, and bumping into each other. This compression of tectonic plates created tremendous pressure and heat in the crust. Now let's go into the future a bit. The first microorganisms evolved to suck CO2 out of the atmosphere and convert it into glucose by the process of photosynthesis. This carbon dioxide would typically be stored in the organism and be released back into the atmosphere when they died, continuing the natural cycle. But not all plants, typically water plants, release their CO2 back into the atmosphere. Instead, they sank to the bottom of the lakes or the ocean floors, where their energy was to lay there forever. But these dead plants sank even further into the earth, and because of the intense heat and pressure of Earth's crust, these organisms were supercondensed into heavy clumps of energy, which would later form into coal, oil, and natural gas, which are consequently our main sources of energy. This is what we would call Goldilocks conditions, as in not too hot and not too cold. If the plants released their energy too quickly after dying, there would be no fossil fuels in the ground, it would have all been lost just as a gas. And if it took too long for them to condense into fossil fuels, all the coal and natural gas would be most likely too deep for us to get to and be in much less supply. And we probably wouldn't have developed as quickly as humans, since we wouldn't have a cheap and easy power supply to get to. When we burn these energy-packed bundles, the chemical energy is released as heat, which is converted into mechanical energy by use of steam, which is converted into electrical power to power your toaster. This type of technology started at the beginning of the Industrial Revolution, when due to machinery taking over the jobs of people, there needed to be an alternate powerful energy source, which was found in fossil fuels. Since then, with greater use of electronics, the fossil fuel industry has exploded, creating trillions and trillions of watts for the whole planet every year.
However, electricity is not the only output we get from burning fossil fuels. As you may remember, the carbon dioxide is still stored up in dead plants, so when it is burned, the gas gets released into the atmosphere, and since it's a greenhouse gas, it makes the rays get trapped in the atmosphere, warming the planet, and hence global warming. Even though there are a few major countries, such as China, Japan, India, or the United States, that are leading contributors to this problem, it is not singularly their job to clean up. Their earthly mistakes affect the whole world, even countries that have minimal pollution rates. One of the main examples of global warming is that the polar ice caps are melting. The caps have suffered for something that was not even their problem. Even though the ice caps had nothing to do with global warming, it was those places that suffered so much. According to data from NASA, NOAA, NCDC, and UC Berkeley Weather Center, global warming isn't a problem that will just casually pass. Instead, it is a huge problem affecting countries everywhere, and it is still rapidly growing, faster than ever. In the past few years, hurricanes and other natural disasters have been appearing around the world more and more frequently. CO2 levels have been rising and will continue to rise to possibly even an unbreathable level. Before long, our crops are going to become contaminated and all food is going to become poison. Mr. Blue, I still don't see what the real problem is. I mean, how is it actually affecting us? Oh, idiotic me from the past. That's a good question. J-Rod knows.
Hi, I'm J. Rod Diamond, the author of Guns, Germs, Steel, God, Grits, and Gravy. In the next 25 years, floods and droughts will become more common in developing parts of the world, and will also affect us at home. Millions of people will die of thirst, and with the flocking of people to cities, disease will become more common, and many people will die because of germs. Another way germs will spread will be through malaria. With the increasing heat, mosquitoes will tend to move further north, bringing malaria with them. The entire global climate will be affected by the new and more powerful storms that will arise. Hurricanes will become stronger and cause much more damage. But in the next 100 years, consequences of our actions will be more severe. Perhaps the biggest problem that will occur in the next 100 years will be the rising sea level. With more heat in the Earth's climate, glaciers at the poles will melt faster, putting more water into the ocean. If all the world's glaciers were to melt, cities like New York, Miami, New Orleans, Rome, and Shanghai will be completely submerged. While the world's ocean will rise, the world's freshwater sources will drain because of evaporation. These will cause a mass extinction of a lot of creatures and even humans who rely on these sources. The top 3 changes in the world as a result of the Earth's climate. The first of them is ice melting worldwide, particularly at the North and South Pole. As a result of this, ice has turned into water and risen sea level. The sea level has risen by approximately 2 inches. This, if it keeps rising, can result in countries with storms and floods. The last of the results is that precipitation all around the world will have strongly increased globally. This can also result in water flooding in voracious countries. It affects the world currently by having made some environments around the world uninhabitable, such as areas in China. It also has contaminated food, water, which results in a high mortality rate. The global temperature has the highest average than ever recorded in human history.
This is also an accelerating problem. Global warming is filled with things that we call positive feedback. Positive feedback is when a certain problem affects another problem, which affects another problem, which magnifies the first problem, which makes the other 2 problems spiral out of control to a giant fiasco of basically death.
Boy, that escalated quickly.
Okay, maybe it's not always that dramatic. But in the case of global warming, it kinda is. The main positive feedback of global warming is that the ice is melting and raising the ocean levels. The Black Ocean will absorb more radiation from the sun, further warming the oceans, melting more ice, which creates more ocean, creating more warm ocean, creating less ice, so you get the point. Another positive feedback that is substantially affecting our world today is the actual evaporation of our oceans, which, by the way, only lowers the ocean level by about a millimeter. You might not know it, but CO2 acts a lot like water vapor, in the sense that it traps sun rays in the atmosphere, hence warming the planet, which then creates more water vapor, and you get the idea.
But not all hope is lost. There are ways we can lower our emissions. With the rise of electric cars, there will be ways we can lower our gasoline emissions into the air. Another way we can obviously lower our emissions is from switching from dirty forms of energy like coal and natural gas to cleaner ones like solar power, wind power, hydroelectric power, and of course hamster power. Okay, probably not that last one, but the other ones have become major industries in the last 20 years. Renewable energy now makes up for 14% of America's energy production, which may not sound like much, but scientists believe that within the next 30 years it could be raised up to 30%. Because of the positive feedback loops we discussed earlier, the Earth is warming at an accelerating rate. If we stopped all our CO2 emissions right now, the world climate would continue to rise, it just wouldn't be accelerating. The process is very tricky in that you actually have to remove the greenhouse gases from the atmosphere, which is a big problem since they are pretty much evenly spread out in the air. But there are ways that scientists are proposing we do this, and a few are very interesting.
One of the most basic ways is literally sucking the CO2 out of the atmosphere and using it as a fuel source. One other interesting idea of reversing climate change is a technique called seeding the oceans. Basically, it is seasoning the ocean with iron, hoping that algae will flourish in that area. The algae will suck up a lot of CO2 when it's at the surface, and when they die, all that carbon dioxide will be taken to the bottom of the ocean, where it will harden and carbonate, never to be seen again. Of course, there are many more ways that we as humans can limit the amount of carbon in the atmosphere, and we'll talk about it next time on Smash Course Large History Vision of the Future.